know that I love to tell stories. I love to tell stories. I believe that stories can get across an idea, an important idea that's filled with truth, even if it might not be factual or it might not be my own story. The first story I want to tell is about a woman who was driving through the drive-through line at Starbucks. Let me tell you the story in her own words. She says, "Pulling my car into the drive-through line at Starbucks, I wondered why it was there were a dozen people ahead of me. It wasn't raining, yet it seemed everyone was driving through today. I was transporting 3 dogs to the groomer, and there was no way that I could leave 2 wild Yorkies and a dachshund alone while I went inside to get my daily dose of coffee. Millie, the dachshund, sat on my lap licking the window. As I peeled her away from the glass, I saw the woman. She too was waiting in line at Starbucks. I smiled and I gestured to her. It went something like this: 'Are you next or am I?' I really didn't know, and either way was really fine." It was not fine with her. Thinking I was trying to snag her spot, she gunned her Suburban, rolled down the window, and let out a string of expletives that made me blush.
Oh my.
"Go ahead, please. I wasn't sure who was first." I pulled Millie back into my lap, hoping that the woman could see I had been dog distracted, and I truly didn't know who was next. She didn't buy it, though. She continued with the name calling without taking a breath. I won't share them here, but the main mantra was certainly not flattering to me. And then something really strange happened. Instead of getting mad or yelling back at her, I had a sense of empathy come over me. I looked at her again, and this time I saw someone different, someone who wrenched my heart. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her hair was pulled back in a natty ponytail. She held her phone in her palm, glancing down at it every few seconds, and she was driving that big old gas hog of a Suburban, my own car of choice when I had 3 kids at home. Dear God, I thought, I was looking at myself 10 years ago. Same car, same ponytail, same frustration. She goes on, "Many of us have been there. Dog vomit on the sofa, both kids having strep throat, the garbage disposal choosing today to break down while I'm trying to disintegrate moldy refrigerator leftovers down the drain. My spouse is mad because dry cleaning didn't get picked up and there's a business trip coming up. Or, and I, Billie, add this, for the men, things are not falling in line the way they're supposed to, the way I expected them to. Other people are taking too long and everything stops until that one annoying person gets their job done. Or the mower, or the tractor, or the car breaks down, or there's a whole lot of mud out there and it takes a lot longer to get places. Life is just not going the way it's supposed to today." Back to the story. The other woman gunned forward just to show me that she could. I left her plenty of room, smiling at her splotchy face. She shot me a sideways glance, a scowl. Her mouth, she mouthed the mantra again. Pulling up to the loudspeaker behind her, I said, "I want to pay for whatever the woman in front of me has ordered, and please tell her that I hope that she has a better day." And I meant every word of it. The woman idled in front of me for a good 4 minutes, talking to the clerk who had leaned out the window. The woman shook her head and handed over a bill. She drove around the side of the building, slowly, this time, no gunning the engine. As I pulled forward, I said to the barista, "No takers, huh?" "Nope. She said she couldn't believe you wanted to pay for her drink after all the names she called you. She said she just couldn't allow it. And said to tell you she was sorry. She felt really, really bad." Did you tell her I hope she had a better today? Yep, and she said thanks, that she already was having a better day. Good to hear. I smiled and handed over $1 to put in the tip jar. As I drove away, as I drove away, I began to cry. Not because I'd been called so many terrible names, but because God had answered my very recent prayer, which was that God would allow me to see people as God sees them, not as I see them. That I might be able to see the hurting inside and not just the hurtful outside. And maybe a few of my tears were of gratitude and amazement that God always shows up with an answer when I sincerely ask. Have you ever had an experience that made you see someone in a new way? Jesus calls us to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Jesus calls us to love one another. Jesus even calls us to love our enemies. That's the hard one. 1 Thessalonians 4:9 from the Message says, the author writes, regarding life together, regarding life together and getting along with each other, you don't need me to tell you what to do. You're God taught in these matters. Just love one another. And the second story I have today, this one comes from Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and several other books as well. She writes that some years ago she was stuck on a crosstown bus in New York City during rush hour. Traffic was barely moving. The bus was filled with cold, tired people who were deeply irritated with one another, with the world itself. Two men barked at each other about a shove that might or might not have been intentional. A pregnant woman got on, and nobody offered her a seat. Rage was in the air. No mercy was found on this bus. As the bus approached 7th Avenue, the driver got on the intercom. Folks, he said, I know you've had a rough day and that you're all frustrated. I can't do anything about the weather or the traffic, but here's what I can do. As each one of you gets off the bus, I'm going to reach out my hand to you. As you walk by, drop your troubles into the palm of my hand, okay? Don't take your problems home to your families tonight. Just leave them with me. My route goes right by the Hudson River, and when I drive by there later, I'm going to open the window and just throw all your troubles away. It was as if a spell had been lifted. Everyone burst out laughing. Faces gleamed with surprised delight. People who had been pretending for the past hour not to notice each other's existence were suddenly grinning at each other like, is this guy serious? Oh, he was very serious. At the next stop, just as promised, the driver reached out his hand, palm up, and waited. One by one, all the exiting commuters placed their hand just above his and mimed the gesture of dropping something into his palm. Some people laughed as they did this. Some teared up. But everyone did it. Everyone. The driver repeated the same lovely ritual at the next stop, and the next stop, and the next stop, all the way to the river. We live in a hard world, my friends. There are times when everything seems cloaked in darkness. We long for the light, but we don't know where to find it. But what if we are the light? What if we are the very agent of illumination that a dark situation begs for? That's what this bus driver taught, that anyone can be light at any moment. This guy wasn't some big power player. He wasn't a spiritual leader. He wasn't some media-savvy influencer. He was a bus driver, one of society's most invisible workers. But he possessed real power, and he used it beautifully for the benefit of others. 1 Thessalonians 4:9 from the Message says, regarding life together and getting along with each other, you don't need me to tell you what to do. You're God-taught in these matters. Just love one another. As everyone certainly knows by now, our nation is very divided and anger abounds. Some want everyone to just quiet down and get along with their vision for our country, while others have no intention of traveling along quietly in what they see as a disastrous direction. This division has been widening for some time now, and we seem further than ever from bridging the chasm that separates us. So what are those of us who are people of faith to do in these circumstances to remain true to our faith and attempt to flourish in this world? Looking to the roots of our faith for guidance, here are some things to consider. First of all, God's call to Abram, and thereby to each one of us to use our God-given blessings to be a blessing to others. Second, God's commandment to treat the alien living among us justly and not to oppress them. Third, God's requirement set forth by the prophet Micah to do justly, love kindness and mercy, and walk humbly with God. And fourth, Jesus' commandment to love God and our neighbors as he loved us. And you know, there's another passage that says, Jesus says to love others as we love ourselves. So often people forget that, as we love ourselves. Jesus repeated directions that we feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger, care for the sick, and visit the prisoner. And while there's other commandments that could be added, doing our best to live according to these principles in these divisive times, working with and supporting those who seem to be doing the same, these are some of the best actions that we can take. I read about some other ideas that we can use in our country and in the world as we try to figure out everything. Don't we want to figure out everything? We can do things like holding doors for strangers, letting people cut in front of us in traffic, drive down a muddy road, a stranger, saying good morning, keeping babies entertained in grocery store lines, stopping to talk to someone who's lonely, tipping generously, waving at law enforcement, sharing food, giving a child a thumbs up. Have you ever seen a kid looking out the back window of a car? Give them a thumbs up. Being patient with sales clerks, smiling at a passerby. I went to seminary in the Chicago area, and we were told not to smile at passerbys, that was a scary thing to do. I'm from Kansas, I couldn't help myself. Didn't always get a smile back, but I couldn't help myself. Buying a stranger a cup of coffee. Why do we do these things? To keep from living in a world where love is invisible. May we join together in showing kindness, understanding, and judging others less. This is all about participating in Jesus' passion and desire for a different kind of world. A world where a woman doesn't get angry in line at Starbucks. A world where she recognizes herself in the frazzled face of another. A world where a bus driver acknowledges a busload of frazzled, upset, irritated people and offers them a way to let go of at least a little piece of their hurt. May we be people who willingly reach out to do a kind thing in order to participate in a different kind of world. 1 Thessalonians 4:9 from the Message says, regarding life together and getting along with each other, you don't need me to tell you what to do. You're God-taught in these matters. Just love one another. Last week, I shared a similar message with the Coldwater United Methodist Church, and the pianist played Let There Be Peace on Earth during the prayer time. It was unplanned and it was so perfect for that particular Sunday. So we're going to sing Let There Be Peace on Earth in just a moment. The last thing I want to share is the last thing that I saw on Facebook last night before I went to sleep. At first I thought it had nothing to do with today's message. This morning I think it has everything to do with it. I invite you to receive this blessing, which I'm going to give the blessing before we sing. Be gentle towards all that remains unhealed and unfinished in you. The space between today's hurt and tomorrow's healing is sacred ground. May we go in peace, healing whatever still hurts in us, so we may be free to love others as we love ourselves. Amen. Amen. I did print